Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. This is Carly. I just want to mention right here at the top, thank you all so much for all of the comments and likes on my last video, and thank you to everyone who subscribed after my very first video. That means so much to me, and I can't wait to continue to make videos and interact with you all, especially when we get to talk about books, which is where today's video is going. Also, please excuse any jingling or clinking noises. I do have a kitty in the room with me and she has a jingly collar on, so forgive that please. Today we're going to go through all of the spreads that I did for my January reads this year. So all of the books that I read in January, I'm going to make a collage style spread for. I want to mention also here that the style of journaling that I'm going for is very collage heavy. I'm not going to be doing a lot of drawing or painting or anything like that. This journal is pretty much strictly meant for me to use a lot of stickers and washi tape and different ephemera to create collages. That's really where I feel the most creative and I don't feel as challenged. Fine art like drawing and painting are really challenging for me. I'm not very talented at them. I would love to be someday, but today this journal is meant for collages. So let's jump into this first collage here. You've seen me already sort of arranging a lot of my pieces here, and this is for my January cover page. So I split up my reading by month like a lot of people do. I feel like it makes a lot of logical sense. It helps me every 28 to 31 days, gives me a nice refresh button or reset button, I suppose, and I can start with 0 read books, and I feel like whatever I have read before and whatever I will read next, there's no pressure. I feel like having a fresh new month gives me a little bit of freedom to just read whatever I want. It's like a mental reset, basically. So since I split up my reading by month, I also wanted to split up my reading journal by month. So every month I will have this little cover page, to show me when I'm flipping through my old journals that these are all of the books I read in the month of January in this year. These are all of the books that I read in the month of February, and so on, just to break it up a little bit and not feel like one long, endless journal, basically. With that said, a huge inspiration for this spread, and the reason why I'm using this beautiful Marigona Suli art sticker with a wolf-looking dog in it, is because I decided at one point recently that I really wanted to try to break up either my reading or my journal or something about my life. I really had this inspiration to split it up instead of by calendar month, by lunar cycle. And I got really interested in researching the names of different full moons throughout the year and why they were called that and which cultures called them what names, basically. And I really kind of got inspired to try to split up my journal in that way instead of by calendar month, because calendar months, as everybody knows, are not consistent. I mean, they're consistent by year, but they're not consistent with each other. January is 31 days, February is 28 days, sometimes 29, and the lunar cycle is consistent throughout the entire year. A lunar cycle is the same length of time as the last lunar cycle, and I thought that was quite beautiful. But I obviously have not done that yet. I don't know if I will ever actually journal that way, but I did decide that I wanted to pull inspiration from that. So this is still my January month of reading, but I pulled inspiration from the title of the full moon according to some cultures, which is the wolf moon. I do want to mention as I'm talking about this that I am getting all of this information from the internet, and I am not doing like full in-depth hardcore research about the history of the names of these full moons. I will say though, I am genuinely interested in this kind of stuff. So if you have information that I did not include here and you know a lot about a specific full moon or a specific culture that would base their time off of the full moon, because I do know a lot of different cultures would use the full moon as a way to denote time. Obviously that makes sense. We're all looking at the same moon. If you know a lot of information about that, or if you have a little tidbit you want to add, please feel free to leave it in the comments. I did decide to go with the title Wolf Moon for the full moon that happens in January. So from my research that I did do, the name Wolf Moon is thought to have a Celtic and Old English origin. There are other names for the full moon, even coming from the Celtic culture, one being the stay home moon, another is the quiet moon. There are also other names coming from Native American cultures like severe moon or center moon. There's also another one from Anglo-Saxon culture called the moon after Yule. To me, the name Wolf Moon had the most potential for artwork and stickers that I can find, and I was not proven wrong when I found this really beautiful sticker from Marigona Suli Art with this kind of wolf-inspired dog howling and a wolf head inside of the moon. I thought it was absolutely perfect for the name Wolf Moon. I don't know how much of that made sense to anybody else or was interesting or even maybe not bizarre. I don't know. But that is where the inspiration for this spread came from. So I mentioned the Marigona Suli Art sticker. I also included a lot of stickers from different places like Amazon and some dropship sites. I included these little phrase stickers that are kind of on the bottom left. They're just strips of different words and phrases and things like that that I got from Michael's. And you can see me now cutting up these pieces of paper where I used some scrapbook paper and stamped these frames on them. The frame stamps came from Amazon, and I stamped 7 of them, and I'm gonna use them to write down what books I read in January. So I read 7 books in January, and I'm gonna lay them all out on this right-hand side. The only piece of decoration that I'm really using on the right-hand side, aside from these frames, are a doily here at the top, and then this wolf sticker that I think you saw in a previous clip. I peeled this from that sticker book that I mentioned in my last video, and they have a couple of different pages in that book that are just full like wallpaper patterns, and they have different silhouettes cut out of them. So you don't really know what kind of stickers are on that page until you start peeling them up. And this one just so happened to have a wolf in it, and I felt like the colors matched really well. I feel like I just got really lucky. And so I put that wolf on the right-hand side and just left it as the main piece of decoration on the right-hand side. So the left hand, obviously you can see I have a lot of different things going on, but the Marigona Suli Art piece is the main focus. All of the other stuff came from Amazon, like the cardstock frames are from Amazon. The letter stickers I made myself, so I do have a sticker cutter, which actually those weren't even cut out, so it doesn't even matter that I have a sticker cutter. I didn't use it for those, but I did print a bunch of letters onto some craft sticker paper. I stamped books read on top of the doily there, just with my little letter stamps. And last but not least, I'm just gonna add some little details here with washi tape, and then we're gonna be done with the cover page spread. The first spread here is for the first 2 books that I read in January. Because I decided to include the book covers as part of the spreads, I feel like I want to make sure that the colors don't clash, and therefore I am finding stationery that matches the book covers. Thankfully, the first 2 books that I read in the month of January both have a warm tone orange and red design, so I used a lot of my warm tone orange and red, very fall themed stationery. I know that is not a very January vibe, but that is what happened. So we're going for a fall pumpkin-y theme here in the first spread of January. The first book that I read is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón and translated by Lucia Graves. This is a book originally published in Spain and then translated into a lot of different languages, English being one of them. And I do believe that it is now pretty much a classic. I think if you look at a lot of classic novel lists, this one happens to be on there, which is really cool. This book is set in Barcelona in 1945. It is post-war, and the city definitely reflects that. The city is almost a character in this story, which is really cool, and the geography of the city is mentioned quite a bit. So it makes you really feel like you are there in Barcelona in 1945. The book focuses on a character named Daniel, who is the son of an antiquarian book dealer who takes him towards the beginning of the book to a secret place where Daniel is able to find a very rare book that he is very drawn to. This book is called The Shadow of the Wind. The author is named Julian Carax, but when he looks for more books by Julian, he's unable to find anything, and even further, he is unable to find any other copies of The Shadow of the Wind. You follow along as Daniel starts to realize that maybe this is on purpose, that someone is potentially seeking out these books and systematically destroying them. This leads Daniel down a path of falling into semi-dangerous situations, trying to solve this mystery and trying to find Julian and figure out what is going on with this author. It is a very gothic story, which I enjoyed. It's very atmospheric, like I mentioned. I don't know that I will say that I loved this book. I picked this book up because it is my husband's favorite book series. I did end up giving this book 4 stars. And even though I used the Copile method, I still think maybe if looking back, I probably would give this 3 stars now after having read quite a few more books this year. I think my rating style maybe has changed. And I think that's just going to be the way it is, that, you know, your rating style, even using a more robust method, may just change over time. And that's okay. I think I would probably give this 3 stars now. I felt like Daniel as a character was pretty hard to connect to. I didn't fully understand his motivations for things. He, one minute was obsessive over a girl, and then the next minute was, in my opinion, startlingly obsessive over finding Julian and figuring out this mystery. And I just felt like it was a little bit too much all over the place for me in terms of Daniel's motivations. I also don't think that the book handled female characters very well. I think the women in the book were either completely empty or a little bit crazy. I don't know. And the men in the book didn't really treat women in a way that was great, and it wasn't really commented on in a way that was critical, I don't think. So, you know, overall, I see why it's a classic. I see why people like it. It is I love the gothic atmosphere of it. But the things that I mentioned sort of took it down a star for me. The second book that I read in January is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. So this is a small town romance inspired by the TV show Gilmore Girls. The main character, Jeannie, inherits a cafe from her aunt, who decides that she no longer wants to run this cafe. Jeannie is looking for a fresh start from her life in the city, so she decides to move to the small town called Dream Harbor and take on this project to start running her aunt's cafe. In Dream Harbor, she meets Logan, a local farmer who is the supplier for the cafe's produce. If you have watched Gilmore Girls, I'm sure that you're already seeing a lot of similarities between this story and Gilmore Girls. I will say that the similarities pretty much stop right around there, which I think is really good. The vibe of the characters interacting with each other is pretty reminiscent of Gilmore Girls in terms of the chaotic energy and everything. But other than that, the story is very much its own. This is somewhat a grumpy sunshine romance, with Logan being the grumpy and Jeannie is our sunshine. They have to figure out how to make their attraction for each other work in a relationship when Logan is pretty skeptical that Jeannie will want to stick around in that small town forever, seeing as how she is, in fact, a city girl. So I really loved this romance. Actually, I was skeptical going in because it was based on that inspiration from an already existing story, but it really surprised me with original characters and heartfelt interactions between two love interests. I thought it was really fun and cozy, and I'm really excited to pick up the next book in the series when it eventually comes out later this year. I also gave The Pumpkin Spice Cafe 4 stars. The stationery that I used for this spread mostly focused around 2 Marigona Sully art sticker sheets, one being the Autumn Breeze sticker sheet and the other is the Autumn Witches sticker sheet. So the left witch sticker is from the Autumn Witches set, and then all of the rest of the Marigona Sully art stickers are from the Autumn Breeze set, I believe. Next up, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. Before I get into talking about what this book is about, I do want to mention I also used Marigona Sully art stickers in this spread. I had just gotten a big order from her and was really excited to use all these stickers, and I did place the order with a lot of my books in mind, so it only makes sense, obviously, that I would use those in my spreads. So hopefully it doesn't get too repetitive. I just really love her art and I was looking forward to using it in my journal, so that's what I did. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries follows our main character Emily, who is a grumpy professor from Cambridge who goes to a small town to study fairy folklore, and she encounters many different things on this trip, and she documents all of it in her field notes. This book is set up as if you are reading Emily's field notes, and so you're seeing things from her perspective as she's writing them down. Emily's main characteristic, other than the fact that she is a world-renowned expert on the study of fairies, is that she isn't great with people. She tends to prioritize her work as a scientist and her own interests rather than connecting with the people around her. She finds connecting with others difficult. In this story, Emily arrives in a village and begins to study the environment around her, particularly pertaining to the fae folk in the area. There are little mysteries throughout this story having to do with the village folk and the fairy folk as well. She starts to unintentionally connect with the people around the town, and also her academic rival, Wendell Bamblebee, shows up to sort of piggyback off of her work. This is where this story really shines, I think. Emily and Wendell have somewhat of a love-hate relationship in which he loves her and she hates him. Wendell is very lackadaisical, very dramatic, very theatrical. In my opinion, he has Howl from Howl's Moving Castle vibes. You follow along Emily and Wendell's experience in this small town and sort of the dangers that they encounter along the way and the bonds that they form through this experience. I happened to read this book during one of the only snowy days of this winter. I sat in front of our window and watched snowflakes fall while reading this gorgeous story with the most beautiful hardcover I have ever seen. Little did I know that there would be so much snow in this book. This is 100% a winter book, and I had such a great experience reading it. I saw some people say that this was too dry and academic, but it worked really well for me. Emily's personality, which I found to have some characteristics of maybe autism or social anxiety, where she has trouble connecting with others. Also, her outlook on her work made a lot of sense to me. I found these things to be relatable and well written, which I really appreciated. The fieldwork felt realistic, so that was relatable to me as well. I have done fieldwork in my past. I come from a STEM field, so I have done fieldwork outdoors, and this experience is relatable to me quite a bit. I loved Emily's passion and expertise in her field of study and her genuine care, eventually, for the people in the village. Wendell is a really interesting character. I mentioned that he reminds me of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. He's pretty aloof and honestly a pretty annoying diva type character, but I actually found Wendell very charming. I have read Howl's Moving Castle before, and I found Howl much less charming, I have to say. I do think that Wendell really redeemed that type of character for me. The author was able to take two pretty unlikable characters and make them both likable and connect with one another through their little love-hate relationship. They were very adorable. I think I loved that it was written as Emily's field notes, although I could never imagine anyone taking field notes in this very narrative style, the way that Emily's field notes supposedly are. But I did love that angle. A lot of times the angle of writing a book as if it was a letter or a diary can come across a little gimmicky to me, but Heather Fawcett did it very well and never made it feel like a crutch for the story. It very much felt like this story was meant to be told through the perspective of it being field notes, which I really enjoyed. The writing was so whimsical and fun, and I really enjoyed that the fairy folk were not fun and whimsical. They were pretty scary. They were pretty ruthless, and there were some characters that were part of the fae world that were allies of Emily's, mostly because of the fact that she understood them and took her time studying them. And there was some aspect of respect there, depending on what fairy folk she was interacting with. So I really appreciated that. I thought it was interesting and gave a nice experience of reading about the fae. Overall, I absolutely loved Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries, and maybe it's not saying much as only the third book that I read this year, but it was definitely my favorite book of the year up until that point, and I gave it 5 whole stars. I know that I mentioned this spread was mostly made using Marigona Suli art stickers, but more specifically, the sticker sheet that I used was the Astronomy Witch washi sticker sheet. So these stickers are a little bit transparent, and I really like the way that it turned out. I think that the difference between this sheet and the one before, other than obviously the material being washi instead of paper, is that the stickers are quite a bit smaller, and I'm not sure entirely yet how I like to set up the spread when the stickers are so small. I felt like the page was quite big compared to the size of the little drawings that I was trying to stick into my spread, if that makes sense. So I did struggle a little bit with the layout, and I'm not sure if I love every choice that I made, but the stickers are beautiful. I love the color. I love how it really plays off of the purple in the book cover, and I'm still happy with it. I think it's my own inability to really craft a good composition when the stickers are so small. You can see that I flipped back to my previous spread to fill out my star ratings, and then I'm going to just draw in my star rating for Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries with my pen, and then we are done with book number 3. I didn't end up writing the review in for this one, and I think I continue to do that throughout. I don't have all of the time in the world. I do have a full-time job, so I set up these spreads on camera, and then sometimes I'll have time to write my reviews on camera, but other times I'll just do it like when I'm sitting in bed about to wind down for the night, or when I'm at my lunch break at work or something like that. So apologies, I'm not trying to leave anyone out of me filling out my review spreads, but hopefully me talking about the book and reviewing it here with you is good enough, and you can see it filled out when I do a flip through in the future. Don't you worry, you'll see it. Up next, we have the 4th book that I read this year, which is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This book is a good old-fashioned yeehaw romance, a good old Western. The story focuses on Clementine, or Emmy, rider, and Luke Brooks. Emmy is a champion horseback rider, and Luke owns a bar in Emmy's hometown. They have known each other for their whole lives, seeing as Luke is Emmy's brother's best friend. After having a horrible riding accident, Emmy decides to return home and get back to her roots on her family's ranch, and hopefully get the confidence to get back on the horse, literally. Emmy is needing to focus on her horseback riding career and getting back her confidence, while Luke is very aware of the fact that he should not have feelings for his best friend's younger sister. So there's a challenging dynamic in this relationship already, and the story follows how Luke and Emmy navigate that challenge and eventually fall in love. I loved this story. This one really surprised me. I did not expect much going into it. I kind of picked it up from the library with a little giggle and thought it would be just a silly time. Turns out this was really beautiful and really heartfelt. Emmy has ADHD, and she talks about how that affects her career in horseback riding, which I had never thought about how ADHD would affect someone in a career like that. There is still quite a bit of spice in this book, which I was happy about. There's obviously some talk about her anxiety getting back into horseback riding and her struggles with ADHD and her mental health and things like that, but it's still fun. It's still a fun little silly Western. Emmy and Luke have a lot of fun together, and they really have this genuine connection, and he supports her and helps her in her journey getting back into her career. And I just found it really charming and really sweet. I read this book in one sitting. I sat and read this in one day and had a great time reading it. I gave it 5 whole stars, which I'm realizing as I'm recording this video that I rated a lot of things pretty highly in January. Don't worry, I do have some books, like I don't just rate everything really highly. I think I just enjoyed a lot of the things I read in January. And like I said, I do look back and see at least a couple that I probably should have rated lower. I think the beginning of the year, you just have a lot of optimism, you know, going into everything that you read with just a lot of hope and joy. And then I get later into the year and I just lose much of that and I decide that everything I read sucks. No, I'm just kidding. But I did genuinely love this book. I would probably still give it 5 stars. I haven't obviously gone back to read it yet, but I think I will reread it in the future since it was such an easy read. This spread was kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things. One of the things being this cowboy hat frog sticker from Earthbound Trading Company. And I just wanted to center around that sticker because it just makes me laugh so much. I also love this little strawberry cow sticker that I got in like a little trade thing with some people locally. And then I wasn't able to finish pasting in my title here because Mango decided to fall asleep on my spread. But I did do that eventually, and you will see it in my flip through. So I will leave it here for a few seconds so that you can enjoy Mango snuggling up to my journal. Up next, I read What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This story centers around a Bolivian-Argentinian character named Inez, and she is an upper society girl in 19th century Buenos Aires. Inez's parents are archaeologists working in Egypt, and she really longs for a relationship with her parents who frequently leave her behind to go do their work in Egypt. However, she receives word early on in the story that her parents have tragically passed. The notice gives her no more information and puts her under the guardianship of her uncle, who was a partner of her parents and is still currently in Egypt continuing their work. She decides to drop everything and sail to Egypt. Her father sent her an ancient ring for safekeeping before he died, but that is all she has to go on in figuring out what happened to her parents. When she arrives in Egypt, her uncle has tasked his assistant, Wit, with getting her out of Egypt, supposedly to keep her safe. The story follows Inez as she finagles her way into archaeological sites and does everything in her power to uncover what happened to her parents. There is also a loose magic system in this story, and Inez is very much wrapped up in that. She has a sense of the ancient magic that exists in this world, and that helps her to uncover a lot of these mysteries. She is guided by the magic in certain items and certain artifacts, and so that plays a part in her journey through this experience. When I think back on my feelings about this book and I try to describe how I felt reading this, the only emotion that I can conjure up is just pure rage. I was pretty enraged reading this book the entire time, and not for normal reasons. I feel like one of the reasons why I felt angry reading this was the choice for Inez to be left out of absolutely everything. And that is just a huge pet peeve for me in reading anything, in any story, when the main character is deliberately left out of so many things. It just burns me up inside. But I don't ever fault the author for that type of storyline because it feels more like a personal preference rather than an actual valid critique of a story, if that makes sense. I'm sure a lot of people don't mind reading stories where the main character is deliberately left out of things. I think that probably other people have less rage having to do with that type of storyline. So I think it's a personal thing more so than anything else. So this book has that vibe where Inez is left out of every valuable piece of information, including like by her own parents, and now her uncle and Wit, he leaves her out of every piece of information that could possibly help her, and it is just so infuriating. As I'm reading it though, I'm not faulting the story for this. I am prepared for there to be some payoff to this frustrating part of the story. So I think the main reading experience is totally fine, and I actually genuinely loved it. It's funny because I was so infuriated, but at the same time, it was a 5-star in my head as I was reading it. I was like, I'm loving this. I love the environment. I love reading about Egypt. It was really conscious of what was going on in Egypt at that time. Obviously, the author did a lot of research on what was going on in Egypt at that time, and that played into the story really well, in my opinion. So it was definitely ramping up to be a 5-star for me. However, this was unfortunately a 4-star. I still think that is a fantastic rating. I'm not mad about reading a 4-star at all. The ending of this story, though, was so infuriating. It was such a cliffhanger to the point where it made me rage. My jaw dropped and I was like, are you kidding me? So I don't know how I feel about cliffhangers like that, but that is where it ended. I don't know if I like the love interest, who is Wit. I cannot figure him out. There's something off about him, and I think that's on purpose, but it just, I don't know. So we'll see. There's a second book coming out. I don't know if it's a duology or more, but there is a second book coming out, so I'm looking forward to picking that up and seeing where this story goes, because I have never been more enraged reading a book. But I did genuinely like it, so I think that's, I guess, a good thing for a book to make you feel a lot of things. And lastly, the 2 final books that I read in January of this year. I used a sticker sheet from Lollipop Studios from Etsy. I ended up using just the strawberry sheet that you see there for this entire double-page spread, and everything else is just ephemera and washi tape and things like that to bring out these peachy red pink colors. The second to last book that I read is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This story is about a character named Jake, who is an English teacher in Maine, which is how a lot of Stephen King books start. Jake finds a portal that takes him back to the year 1958. At first, he is just exploring the year of 1958, exploring the area around him at that time, admiring the cars and the diners and listening to the music of that time and going to a soda fountain. However, he eventually realizes that he could make a really big difference in the history of the United States by preventing the assassination of the then president, John F. Kennedy. The Kennedy assassination happened in 1963, so Jake has to wait from 1958 to 1963 in order to make this change. So you follow Jake on his mission to change this piece of history, but you also follow him basically living his life as a modern man in the late 50s, early 60s. At first, I found reading about that time pretty interesting. I think I also find soda fountains and 50s cars and music really fascinating, and it sounds like a really bright and interesting time. Although I think there are some aspects of that time that I definitely would not have liked. So it's interesting to read about, but there are parts of it that I feel like may not have been fleshed out as much. I feel like I could definitely excuse it easier if the book had been shorter. Maybe there wasn't time to really go into the minutia of what the 1950s were like for everyone in the country. But this was almost a 900-page book where you read about every little detail of Jake's life, including what he eats for breakfast, what the kids in his English class think about certain things. You're also reading about the ins and outs of the life of the person who assassinated Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, and his family. So I think there was definitely time to go into the challenges of that time in history as well, but it was a little bit skated over, I think. I love a good portal fantasy story. I also really like the idea of going back in time and changing some piece of history. I find that really fascinating. A modern person interacting with the past, or a person from a past interacting with modern people, that kind of storyline is really interesting to me. I just think that Stephen King is such a character-focused writer that I felt like I was being forced to try to care about Jake's day-to-day life, when in reality, I really just wanted to see him do his time travel thing. So I liked the story. Sometimes I feel like I could read Stephen King describing paint dry and still enjoy it because he has a writing voice that I really like, but this one I think just came off a little bit too slow for me. I could have done with some condensing overall, though I did give the story a 4-star because it was well written. I do like Stephen King books and it was a pretty decent one. I think, again, similar to the other book that I mentioned, looking back, I would probably have given this a 3-star, but at the beginning of the year, optimism is high and I'm ready to rate things well. And so even with my compile system, I did end up giving this a 4-star. The very last book that I read in January is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wong. I squeezed this book in the very last second of January. It's a graphic novel, so I read it in one very quick setting. The story of The Prince and the Dressmaker centers around a character named Prince Sebastian, who is a prince, obviously, and is expected by his parents to get married soon. He has a secret life that he hides from everyone, which is that he enjoys putting on dresses and going out in town at night. He hires Frances to become his dressmaker. She is a talented dressmaker in the local village, and they become very close friends, and she holds his secret for him. Eventually, there becomes a situation where holding on to his secret starts to threaten her dream of becoming a more established fashion designer, and Sebastian has to make a choice between keeping his secret or potentially harming his friend's future. I really loved this graphic novel. The art was beautiful, the characters felt really genuine. I really loved the relationship between Sebastian and Frances. I especially love where the relationship ended up. I feel like the ending of this story really shows that a person's gender expression doesn't necessarily indicate their romantic preferences, and I ended up giving The Prince and the Dressmaker also 4 stars. Hopefully my ratings for this month are not super boring. I know that I gave all 4 and 5 stars. I promise the rest of the year is not that monotone, I guess, in my ratings, but January, I was feeling good. Like I said, honestly, a lot of the books that I read genuinely were really, really good. So 4 and 5 stars, I'm not mad about it. I know that sometimes when I listen to book reviews though, I am interested not just in really good reviews. So we will see where we end up the rest of the year, but that is everything that I read in January. While we're wrapping up here at the end, I just want to reiterate how thankful I am for all of you that left comments and subscribed to my channel in my last video and gave me a thumbs up. It means so much. And if you are returning from the video that I posted before this one, that means so much to me. So thank you for joining me for this video. Thank you for watching all the way to this point. I'm sure not everybody made it to this point, so I really appreciate it. I am having so much fun. This is really the bread and butter of what I was looking forward to doing, talking about books, and we're doing it and I'm loving it. And I would really appreciate if you want to continue following me along through this reading journal journey, please subscribe. Go ahead and turn on a notification bell if you want to know when I post, because I don't have a schedule necessarily. I just post when I can. And if you want to leave me a like and comment down below about what you thought of any of these books if you've read them, or pick your favorite spread of mine and go ahead and leave me a comment of what your favorite one was, or give me an emoji that you think best represents your favorite spread that I made. I think my favorite one is probably, oh, actually, I don't know why I set myself up there. Maybe the peach strawberry looking one, or maybe the very first one, the pumpkin spice. I don't know, but I cannot wait to get going on February. I've already started filming some of those spreads, so I will see you all in that video. If you would like to see it, please stay tuned. It's coming, and I'll talk to you all then. Bye.